Somewhere in a factory in China, engineers just deleted a piece of technology that has existed since the 1920s. Not a screw, not a switch, a wire. For almost a century, every robotic lawnmower on Earth needed one thing to work: a physical wire, buried in the ground, tracing the exact border of your lawn. Now, a new generation of Chinese-made mowers doesn't need it at all. They see the lawn, they map it, they mow it, with no wire, no fence, and almost no human involved. And if this technology keeps spreading the way it's spreading right now, the machine sitting in your garage, the one you push, pull start, or ride, might be the last one you ever own. Mowing the lawn feels like one of those tasks nobody questions. You do it because grass grows, and grass has to be cut. But step back for a second. A lawnmower is, mechanically, still doing what it did in 1830, when the very first mechanical mower was patented in England, spinning a blade fast enough to slice grass. Gas engines, electric motors, battery packs, all of that came later. The core idea never changed. What has changed is who, or what, is expected to push it. For most of history, that answer was you. Every week, rain or shine, around the trees, along the fence, up the slope in the back corner that never seems to end. It's such a normal part of life that almost nobody stops to ask the obvious question. Does a human being actually need to be there for this? Turns out, a growing number of Chinese robotics companies think the answer is no, and they've spent the last few years building the technology to prove it. Here's the part that stays invisible until you actually try to automate lawn care. The very first generation of robotic mowers, the ones that have been on the market since the late 1990s, came with a catch. To work, they needed a boundary wire, a physical cable buried a few centimeters underground, tracing the entire perimeter of the lawn. The robot follows an electromagnetic signal from that wire to know where yard ends and flower bed begins. Installing that wire isn't a 5-minute job. On a typical property, laying it down takes anywhere from 2 to 8 hours, and professional installation runs between $200 and $500. And wires, being buried underground, do what buried things do over time. They degrade. A shovel, a frost heave, a curious dog, and suddenly the signal breaks, and the mower stops working until someone digs up the fault and repairs it. So the smart mower still depended on old, dumb infrastructure buried in the dirt. The intelligence was in the robot, the limitation was in the wire. Engineers knew this for years. GPS alone wasn't precise enough. Consumer GPS can be off by several meters, which is useless when you're trying to keep a mower from driving straight into a flower bed. Cameras alone struggled with shadows, rain, and cheap sensors that couldn't tell a garden hose from a tree root. For a long time, no wire and reliable seemed like a contradiction. You could have one or the other, not both. So a handful of Chinese robotics companies, some of them already famous for indoor robot vacuums, asked a different question. What if, instead of relying on a single sensor buried in the ground, the mower combined several forms of perception at once: satellite positioning, cameras, and motion sensors? The same basic recipe self-driving cars use to understand the world around them. What if the lawn didn't need a wire at all, because the robot could simply learn to see it? This is where it gets genuinely interesting. Segway 9Bot's robotic mower line, called Navimo, uses a system it calls EFLS, Exact Fusion Locating System. In plain terms, it blends satellite positioning technology known as RTK, which can be accurate down to a few centimeters, with a camera-based safety layer the company calls Vision Fence. Engineers knew this for years. GPS alone wasn't precise enough. Consumer GPS can be off by several meters, which is useless when you're trying to keep a mower from driving straight into a flower bed. Cameras alone struggled with shadows, rain, and cheap sensors that couldn't tell a garden hose from a tree root. For a long time, no wire and reliable seemed like a contradiction. You could have one or the other, not both. So a handful of Chinese robotics companies, some of them already famous for indoor robot vacuums, asked a different question. What if, instead of relying on a single sensor buried in the ground, the mower combined several forms of perception at once: satellite positioning, cameras, and motion sensors. The same basic recipe self-driving cars use to understand the world around them. What if the lawn didn't need a wire at all, because the robot could simply learn to see it? This is where it gets genuinely interesting. Segway 9bot's robotic mower line, called Navimow, uses a system it calls EFLS, Exact Fusion Locating System. In plain terms, it blends satellite positioning technology known as RTK, which can be accurate down to a few centimeters, with a camera-based safety layer the company calls Vision Fence. Think of RTK as GPS's much more precise cousin. Regular GPS on your phone can be off by the width of a house. RTK-corrected GPS can pinpoint a location down to about the width of your hand. Vision Fence adds the second layer. Cameras that detect objects as small as roughly 1 centimeter, a garden hose, a toy, a pet, and stop the blades before contact. Setup, instead of digging trenches, becomes something you do with your thumb. You walk the mower around the edge of your lawn once, using a phone app, tracing a virtual boundary instead of a physical one. Newer models can even auto-map the yard on their own, identifying the edges without you walking the perimeter at all. No cable, no trench, no $200 installation bill. The immediate, practical result? A mower that sets up in under an hour on a lawn of almost any shape without a single wire in the ground. Here's where the story stops being just no more wires and becomes something bigger. Once you remove the wire and replace it with cameras and satellite positioning, you're no longer just building a mower. You're building a robot that actually understands the shape and layout of your land, and that opens the door to things a wire could never do. Take Dreamy, a company originally known for robot vacuum cleaners, which brought that same indoor robotics know-how outdoors with its robotic mower A1, unveiled at CES 2024. It uses a 3D sensing system the company calls OmniSense, a 360-degree, wide-angle scanner with roughly 70 meters of range and precision down to about 1 square centimeter. In its most efficient mode, it's rated to cover up to 2,000 square meters, roughly half an acre, in a single day. Then there's Mammotion, whose Luba 2 all-wheel drive model uses 4-wheel drive and AI-based vision positioning to climb slopes as steep as 38 degrees, around an 80% grade. That's terrain a traditional push mower simply can't handle safely, and one of the main reasons hillside lawns have historically been mowed by hand or not mowed evenly at all. The same model introduced something almost nobody expected from a lawnmower, what the company calls 3D lawn printing. The ability to mow in specific geometric patterns, like diamonds or checkerboards, the kind of look that used to require a professional groundskeeper with a striping roller. And Ecovacs, another company with roots in indoor robot vacuums, brought that same navigation and mapping expertise to its GOAT line of outdoor mowers, treating a backyard the same way its older robots treated a living room floor, something to be scanned, mapped, and methodically covered. What started as, let's remove the wire, turned into an entire category of consumer robotics companies, many of them Chinese, several of them already dominant in indoor home robotics, converging on the same outdoor space at almost the same time. Quick question while we're on this. Would you actually trust a robot with spinning blades to operate autonomously in your yard, around kids or pets, without a wire keeping it in check? Drop your honest answer in the comments. And if this kind of deep dive into how everyday tech quietly reinvents itself is your thing, consider subscribing. There's more of this coming. None of this means the traditional lawnmower is dead yet, and it's worth being upfront about why. Price is still a real barrier. Even with Chinese manufacturers selling these wire-free models at roughly 20 to 40% less than premium European brands like Husqvarna or Works, entry-level wire-free robotic mowers still start around $500 to $800, and higher-end models with LiDAR and all-wheel drive can run well past $2,000, sometimes into the $10,000 range for large commercial units. A basic push mower, by comparison, can still be bought for under $200. There are functional gaps too. Reviewers testing these machines have noted they're not built to handle everything a traditional mower does. Heavier debris like fallen leaves or small twigs can still trip them up, and they tend to move slowly and methodically rather than quickly, since speed isn't the priority, precision is. There's also a dependency question. Some RTK-based systems rely on network positioning data delivered through an app and, in some cases, a connected service, which means your lawnmower now depends, at least partly, on software and connectivity, the same way a smart thermostat does. If the service changes or the app stops being supported, the hardware's usefulness could change with it. And it's worth saying plainly, this is still an emerging category. It's growing fast, and the specs are genuinely impressive, but it hasn't fully displaced the traditional mower market yet. It's competing with it, not replacing it, at least for now. Step back, and this isn't really a story about grass. It's a story about what happens when a handful of companies, several of them already experts at teaching a machine to understand a living room floor, turn that same expertise toward the outside world. First it was vacuuming, now it's mowing. The pattern suggests it won't stop there. A wire in the ground was never really about grass either. It was a stand-in for a much bigger problem. How do you teach a machine to understand a physical space it's never seen before without a human drawing the lines for it first? Cameras, satellites, and a bit of onboard intelligence just solved a small, specific version of that problem in your backyard. The bigger question is where else that same solution quietly shows up next. What do you think? Is autonomous, wire-free robotics like this actually ready to take over more of our outdoor chores? Or is there still something a human eye catches that a camera and a satellite signal can't? Let me know in the comments, hit like if this changed how you look at your own backyard, and subscribe if you want to keep following where this kind of quiet, unglamorous innovation goes next.